Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the Durham Police Department, um, City of Durham Real-Time Crime Center Town Hall. We appreciate everyone coming. I think people may still be coming in, and that's okay. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can respect everyone's time. Um, we are going to do some introductions for the staff here, so everyone knows who you're talking to, and then we're going to tell a little bit about what the project is, and then we'll be taking questions and giving answers after that. If you have a question, please make sure you put it either in the chat or raise your hand so that we can make sure everyone gets a chance to speak and no one is talking over each other. And the meeting is being recorded so that we can share it with people who are not able to attend tonight, but are also still interested in hearing about the Real-Time Crime Center. So again, thank you all for coming. My name is Renelle Campbell. I am an assistant chief with the Durham Police Department. I work over Field Operations Patrol, and I'm also on the Real-Time Crime Center committee. We've been working on that committee to establish a real-time crime center and kind of putting those pieces together and seeing what that looks like. Part of that real-time crime center is Peregrine, and that's why we're here at the meeting. And we have a representative from Peregrine here that is also going to be able to answer questions. So I'm going to go around the virtual room and let everyone introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Captain Kushai.
Hello, Captain Dan Kushai. I'm Captain over Investigative Services and the chair for the Real-Time Crime Center Committee.
Thank you. Next, I see Assistant Chief Garcia.
Good evening, Raul Garcia, Assistant Chief, Field Operations.
Thank you. Next, I see Deputy Chief Clancy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Clancy. I am the Deputy Chief of Police for Administrative Services Bureau.
Thank you. And Deputy Chief Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jermaine Jackson. I'm the Deputy Chief over Field Operations.
Thank you. Assistant Chief Pyatt.
Good evening, everybody. Dave Pyatt. I'm the Assistant Chief for the Investigative Services Bureau, which includes criminal investigations, vice narcotics, as well as forensics.
All right. Chris Bushak.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Bushek, I'm the IT director, and I'm on the RTCC working group.
Thank you. And then I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone else before I get to last but not least, Tim Shriver.
Thank you, Chief. Tim Schreiber here from Peregrine Technologies, and I lead our state and local government business. I live here in Baltimore. I'm based here in Baltimore tonight, but for the last about week and a half, been down there with Durham to be a part of these conversations over the last week and a half, and I've really enjoyed them and grateful for the chance to be a part of them. So thank you to the Durham community and Durham PD for having me, and looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move right into this so we can answer as many questions as possible. Captain Kusha, do you want to just briefly talk about how we got here to the Real-Time Crime Center?
Sure. All right. So we were tasked with a project, the Real-Time Crime Center. And what we did, we went to several other real-time crime centers, kind of see how they operated. And we came back and we wanted to see how we could make our operations more efficient and basically do more with less. So we came across several options. One, like we're here tonight to talk about Peregrine, essentially that it can streamline our workload. It can help us solve all kinds of crimes quicker. That goes all the way from homicide to stolen vehicles. And this is just the first phase of the project, is getting this software to help us do that. So that's the basics. That's where we're at right now.
Thank you. And then Tim, if you want to just do a quick overview with your company.
Yeah, for sure. So let me just start with, how I come to this work. I came to Peregrine after spending time in law school studying policing and studying the ways in which policing could be made both more precise and effective in keeping communities safe, as well as how to reduce the harms of policing. And I spent some time at the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division looking at the ways in which the federal government can use regulations to do that. And I personally was a bit disillusioned by its ability to shape, work on, the ways in which 17,000 police departments in this country work, and was lucky enough to meet the team from Peregrine in the early days, about 4 years ago, when Peregrine was in the early days of R&D. And saw the ways in which this piece of technology could help departments take the data they already have and make it more useful, make it more streamlined, make it the department more capable of targeting their resources at solving crimes, at preparing officers to respond, at designing strategies to keep communities safe, as well as making that data more accessible such that departments could more effectively share that with the public. And that's what really got me excited about Peregrine in the first place. So I joined the team about 3.5 years ago. The company began back in 2018. And as some background on Peregrine, our two co-founders began in the homicide division of a small, medium-sized department out in the West Coast in the Bay Area. They spent a year helping that department figure out how to take all its disparate and fragmented data and fuse it together and make it easier to solve crimes like homicides, different kinds of complex violent crimes. And that was the birth of Peregrine 8 years ago. We kind of slowly grew across a few departments where we did R&D over several years, and then started growing across the country. We now serve about 300 communities around the country. We work in about 25 states, including 2 communities not far from here in Durham. Raleigh, North Carolina, and Cary have just come on board, and they're just getting started with Peregrine. And the core of what we were built to solve is something that's kind of, pandemic across local government agencies. I think many of us experience in our day-to-day jobs as well, but data sits in lots of different places. The data that already exists, we're not talking about collecting any new information, putting any more sensors, surveillance on the street, just taking the information that already exists inside a police department. And that, for those who aren't familiar with, haven't been on a ride along, I'd recommend it, who don't know the insides of how a police department works. The day-to-day job of a police department, a police officer often means looking at 6, 10, 15 different systems. There's a 911 system where details of a 911 call are documented. There's a records management system where arrests are documented. There are citation systems where you might have parking citations. There are GIS systems where you have maps and different map layers to understand, the shape of a city. And the list goes on. I can give you a lot of different examples. And the core challenge, whether you're a patrol officer, a detective, a chief, is to figure out how to bring all that data together yourself to be able to get an insight. Again, whether that's an insight on the way to a call, trying to solve a crime, or trying to create a strategy for a department. And so what Peregrine does is it takes all of those disparate and fragmented and often dirty data sources, fuses them together into one place, cleans and models that data to make it easier to use, and then provides a number of ways for personnel inside the department to interact with that data to make it more useful in their day-to-day. So what does all that mean? In terms of the cleaning and transforming the data, I'll give you just 2 examples of what that means. On the one example would be, the mayor of one of the cities we work in asked their police chief how many Hyundais were stolen last year. And that was a really hard question to answer because Hyundai was misspelled many times by police officers who were inserting information, which is a really common problem, both inserting information, period, but especially the word Hyundai because it's a difficult word to spell for most of us English speakers. And so what Peregrine does is automatically cleans and normalizes all those misspellings of Hyundai into one spelling of Hyundai, so that anytime someone looks up, hey, I need all the information on Hyundais, that presents as that one spelling, so that you don't have the issue of, hey, I just pulled back all the Hyundais that were correctly spelled. So that's like an example of answering like a fairly, what seems like a basic question from the public or from an elected official, but is actually in the data of policing, actually a pretty hard question to answer, but a relatively simple technical function to clean that data and make sure we get that right. All the way to something more complex like cleaning up a deduplicated database. So most departments in the country, including Durham, police departments, EMS departments, struggle with duplicated records. You might have persons entered in many, many times because they've interacted with, say, the police department many times. And so taking my own name, it might be Tim Shriver, Tim P. Shriver, Timothy Shriver, Tim Shriver Jr. Those all might be listed with, again, same social security number, same birth date, same address. And the human eye could look at those and say, hey, those are all the same person. But if you're just typing in Tim Shriver, you may just get that first record. Now, why does that matter? Well, for a patrol officer, that might matter because you get back just the one record that has, hey, we just had a traffic citation for this person, but doesn't have all the rich information we have that might list a history of violent crime or a history of mental illness or a history of specific needs that that patrol officer ideally would know before they would interact with that person. For a homicide detective, that might be, hey, we only have this one piece of information on this person with just a little bit of sparse data. But hey, if I had all that information, there might be the needle in that haystack that might allow me to make the next step in this case, get the lead I need. And so when you look up that name and you don't have all the information, that can really be the difference between solving and not solving a case. And so what Peregrine has designed is an ability to take all of those misspellings, all those different spellings, to be able to analyze an entire database and be able to automatically merge those into one person record such that all that data sits in one place, but to make sure that that data is itself auditable and examinable by a human eye. So it's really important that, yes, the technology can help to merge those, but that it has a clear marker that says, hey, just to be clear, this has been merged. And you can look behind the curtain and see, hey, are all the merged entities. So in case human eye can catch an error, that's what that's there for. And so these are the kind of ways in which we're cleaning and transforming that data. And then the way it gets used is, hey, again, going to a 911 call, making sure a patrol officer has all the information they need on an address, such as what are the last 15 calls that happen at this address? What are the, are there is there any history of, guns at this address? Is there any history of anyone with a mental illness at this address? And we've seen this again and again and again. When officers show up with that further information, they can show up and they can either show up prepared for what might be behind that door. They can also call in a team that they might not know that they need, such as I know Durham's really proud of their heart program, can call in that heart team. They may not know that if they don't know that that address or that person that they're going to see has, if we don't have all the information there. So that's just one example there. Again, you go to a homicide detective, you go to a violent crime detective, being able to piece all this data together that would otherwise sit across 6 or 7 systems. You can imagine how tying those systems together automatically would allow that person to quickly move from, okay, I've got this person, I've got this location, I've got this driver's license number, or whatever it might be to solve the crime. And that can make, again, the difference between solving and not solving that crime. And so those are some of the ways in which Peregrine's being used by about 300 communities across the country to do everything to speed response, improve the safety of response, solve and clear crimes, build crime strategy, report out to the public, and respond to public information requests more quickly and confidently. And that's what we're excited to do in Durham if given the chance. So again, as I said before, I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. I'm grateful to be here tonight and for the conversations over the last 2 weeks. And welcome any questions, concerns. I know there have been plenty over the last 6 conversations. And we at Peregrine appreciate that Durham's as a community is taking this process really seriously and are including us in the process such that we can answer any questions. So that's what I'm here for, to answer whatever questions you may have. And I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Tim. We can take the first question if anyone has one. If you're not comfortable saying it out loud, feel free to put it in the chat and I'm happy to read it out and give an answer. Also, if there are no questions, that's fine too. We have done several of these town halls. This is about the 7th one that we've done, so a lot of questions have been answered already. How much will this cost Durham, both initially and in future years? Was put in the chat by Ruby S. Thank you, Ruby, for that question. Would you like to speak? We can. Oh, that's Shanice. Okay, so I'm going to answer Ruby's question. The cost is $515,000 spread out over 3 years, which comes out to about $170,000 a year. Is that right? Does that sound right?
172,500 a year. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. And then it looks like Shanice Renee would like to maybe speak. It's the next person we had. Can we unmute Shanice?
Yes, I'm unmuted now, if you can hear
Okay.
me?
We
Yep.
can hear you.
Okay. Um, we, my organization started, well, we had the first initial meeting with um, Police Chief Andrews and um, Officer Campbell and a few other folks. And initially we were told, through Reddit, tips on Reddit, that the police chief was going to have a meeting with someone from and I get these so mixed up, Palantir. And then it came out that no, it's not Palantir, it's this other company, Peregrine. And our issue around like us being able to keep us safe and not have our data like sold and information sold to other companies, whatever. Um, I think in the initial meeting, it was stated that um, there are no guarantees around us actually being able to, or you all actually being able to um, keep our data safe outside of having an actual, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a system that's sorry, a system that's actually like in the department, a physical system that's in the department where you all can house data. And I'm curious to know like what blocks are put up or what security features are there that like we know what we're dealing with in the White House and with a lot of folks right now where they're not actually following the law. So if like Elon Musk or whoever was like, yes, I want this data, how do we know that our information won't get sold off?
Okay. Thank you, Shanice, for that question. I'm going to let Captain Kushai take that one.
Hey, I just want to, as far as the Palantir thing goes, we never looked at him, never talked to him. I know that it was started on Reddit, but we had nothing to do with that. Never, no conversations with the police department and anything close to that. So just want to put that to rest. As far as the security of the data, we either Tim or Chris Bushek can speak is probably better versed on that than I.
I'm happy to give just like Peregrine. I can say my sit, and then I'd like Chris, I think, for you to speak to how data is currently secured at DPD today, what's on physical systems, what's in the cloud. But yeah, Shanice, I think it's a really fair question given a lot of what's in the press and a lot of what we've seen in politics today. So I understand the concern. Couple of things. The data that is moved into Peregrine is much like data that has moved into, like right now, you have digital evidence data that's stored in evidence.com. That's another service that the department uses, which stores data, sensitive data, in a cloud environment. Peregrine would also be storing data in a cloud environment. That would be that evidence data plus the 911 data plus the records management data. So there's already Durham PD data that's sitting in the cloud. This would be sitting in Peregrine in the cloud environment. That cloud environment is built specifically for a local government. It has to withstand a series of different types of standards, including CJIS standards, which are determined by federal and state government that determine the security of any information that's CJIS, and CJIS means any data that regards criminal history. That's a rigorous set of standards we have to meet. We also, in other deployments of Peregrine, do health-related work, and so there's HIPAA data. That is a whole nother level of requirements. And then on top of that, we meet what's called a SOC 2 standard for securing that data. So the data is stored in a secure government cloud environment, much like any data that a police department might use, including data that's being stored in a government cloud environment today. And that data belongs to Durham today. It belongs to Durham when it sits with Peregrine, and if a Peregrine contract were to end, it would still belong to Durham. And Peregrine does not sell that data, has never sold data, has never bought data, does no data brokering. The only time data is shared with anyone that's not DPD is when Peregrine is directly directed in writing to do so. And the only time that usually happens is when a department decides it wants to share information with another police department with whom they're collaborating on an investigation or on a series of investigations. So if DPD were to say, please share information with Raleigh so that we can collaborate, Peregrine would do that, but only if given written direction. All of this is in the contractual terms that we must abide by. There are financial and legal accountability for if we breach that. And we do this in 300 departments across the country. And our integrity, our trust, our kind of position, delivering the services we do depends on the ability to deliver on those promises. The federal government has no more access to our system than any of the systems that DPD currently stores sensitive information in today. Again, the 911 system, the records management system, both managed by a company called Central Square. Evidence.com, it's its own company, managed by Axon. And so these other vendors already store and hold this data. And they are all held to this standard as well. So, and that's been true, for as long as, Durham's been working with these various vendors. So we're another vendor held to the same standard. We hold ourselves actually to a higher standard than is required by law. And we're contractually obligated. Our business model is built around protecting that data with everything we can possibly do. And so the White House, the DHS, we've talked and, someone asked about previous conversations, folks have brought up HSI and ICE and other organizations that have been, that have taken concerning action in various communities across the country, just to say the least, have no more access to Durham data today than they would in a world with Peregrine, because there's no other ways in which they could access that data that they can't access it today. So to the question about past concerns, I'll mention it. Like what has been brought up is that these bodies can subpoena data, and they can subpoena that data today, and they can subpoena that date in any world. Our commitment, if subpoenaed, is to first let Durham know about that and do everything we can not to share that data. But again, they could subpoena Central Square for that information today. They could subpoena Durham directly for that information today. I'll let Chief Campbell and Captain Cujo talk to some of the reasons why in past meetings Durham PD has pointed out why HSI or ICE would have no interest in the data that Durham has, but that's for them to explain. So yeah, that's how Peregrine handles the information that would be given to us. That's how we handle the information all across the country. I will pass the mic back to the DPD team to discuss kind of their policy on that front.
Thank you, Tim. As he said, we don't have any interest in information that has anything to do with documentation status or residency status in this country. When we interact with our community members, that has no law enforcement value for us, whether they are documented or undocumented. So we don't record that information. We do the best job that we can do for every single person in our community. So for us to be concerned about outside agencies such as Homeland Security or ICE getting that information, we don't have it in any recorded format where they would be able to subpoena it from us. We do participate in the U visa program, and that helps for people who are unaware of what that is. That helps our community members who have been a victim of crime or a witness to crime in exchange for them staying and participating in the criminal investigation and testifying in court. They will be granted the ability to stay in the country to participate in the criminal investigation. That information, though, is something that we're just verifying for the government to make sure that there actually is a criminal case that they are a part of. So that I believe that answers the question about us sharing information. We would not share anything that we don't get without a subpoena that we're not required to share. And our attorneys and the city attorneys would very carefully vet that subpoena to make sure we're not giving out any information that we're not required by a judge to give out.
Chief Campbell, there's a question that says, can you broadly, by PA, can you broadly characterize the data sources and types that are planned for inclusion initially and those with high potential for later addition? Are there city-owned systems, city-owned by various government entities and private systems? So I did type in the chats. It's our internal database that we already have right now. The CAD, NIBIN, 911 calls, RMS system. So basically, just to kind of give you an idea how it would work, if an investigator is looking for working a crime, so let's say a stolen vehicle, they could enter in information into the search bar and it would go out to the different systems and show the investigator where that information is. So let's say they type in a tag and that same tag was an abandoned vehicle on the side of 40 like 2 days ago. It would show them that, oh, there's a record with that. So they click on it and it'd take you to the source record and they could verify, yes, that's the car I'm looking for, or no, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Instead of going to the different databases and logging in and doing, 17 different logins and then searching through things. So it brings that piece of the puzzle closer so they can look at it, verify, and then work on the case. And all the information that's coming back is always verified by an actual human, either an analyst or investigator or a patrol officer. So city-owned systems, and let's see, it said various government entities. So no, it won't be connected to other government entities. It does have the ability to connect with other agencies such as Raleigh or Cary, who both have it. But we, as it stands right now, we're not have any plans to do that. Now, that said, there's a level of access between that can be between the agencies. So we might just know that a record exists and not be able to see it, and vice versa. So say as my example, if I type in a car and it was found on the side of someplace in Raleigh, it might just say, hey, there's a record. Then I could still call up the investigator over in Raleigh and find out if it's what I'm looking for. It's just a level of sharing. Did I explain that okay, Tim?
Yeah, going back to what I said before, I'll iterate is Cap. We can make that kind of sharing available if told to, but it's not kind of automatic as part of Peregrine, that kind of sharing with even of that limited level of data with the city of Raleigh. So yes, that is absolutely a potential, Captain. If you all decide you want your system, your instance of Peregrine and Raleigh system to have data sharing between them. There's two other questions in here that regard other companies. There's the mention of Palantir and the mention of Flock. So I'll again allow DPD to speak to their side of this. Just from our company side, I want to clarify there's no relationship between Flock and Peregrine. Flock is another law enforcement technology company that primarily builds license plate reader technology, license plate reader surveillance, and allow DPD to speak to their perspective on Flock and why they don't work with Flock. We have no relationship with the company. And then in terms of Palantir, I think there was a remark that we're like Palantir Light. I think, obviously you can imagine we don't see ourselves as Palantir Light. I think there's, something that makes us, this was asked last night, was, why are you different from a Palantir? And I feel really strongly on this topic and I'm happy to answer more questions on it. But I think what's really critical to understand is that a company like Palantir was built in the federal government, serving on relatively secret missions, developing its technology behind the scenes without any transparency. That's what they were. I don't know a lot about them, but I know that that's where they were built and they were focused. We were built in local government. We were built. Our first department was a local police department. And every department we've worked with since then has been a part of local government, a fire department, EMS, emergency management, courts, DAs, police departments. And because we were built in local government, we've had to withstand the scrutiny of local government, like conversations like these, where we have to share specifically, not just in these conversations, in contracts, on our website, precisely what we do and what we don't do, and have that, scrutinized by communities, by groups of all kinds. And I think that makes us a very different company. We are built to serve the needs of local government. We are built to serve the needs of police departments, fire departments, emergency management departments, courts, DAs. And we were built to do so with the needs, the privacy and civil liberties concerns, the data security concerns of communities like yours and mine. So I think that makes us quite a bit different than a company like Palantir that was not built with any of those things in mind.
And I can jump in on the flock. So we did look at flock as one of the initial, and we're not big fans of flock, so we didn't sign anything with flock as far as paying for anything. We do have their free tier that's a MOU, which is basically, so what flock does is they put cameras on private property throughout Durham. So there's neighborhoods and businesses that have flock, and so if a stolen vehicle on the national list goes by, then we would get an alert that car had gone by, and then that would be added to the case file, if that makes sense. So hopefully they answer your question about flock. But no, we're not paying for anything flock related. We're not doing anything. We're doing the least amount possible with flock. I think B was up next. She's had her hand up for a while.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Great. I actually wanted to go back and address some of the responses to Shanice's question earlier. I hear a lot of statements of good intention from y'all and assurances, but I'm wondering how much, to what extent you are contractually, legally bound to not share information beyond what is subpoenaed in terms of sharing with any other entity, government entity, anything. I'm not talking about selling information. I understand y'all don't do that, but sharing information. I hear you saying that you won't, but I wonder if that is in writing in the contract. I also just want to clarify a little bit in terms of the response to that. What I'm not hearing is, I understand that you're saying that the data will be no more available than it would be just with DPD, but it's also a lot more data, which is part of the concern, I think, because there's a lot more information. If y'all were, for instance, subpoenaed by ICE, there's a lot more information to give on people who are being victimized by ICE. And from what I'm hearing, there wouldn't be anything that you can do about that because you're going to give over the data if it's subpoenaed. And I have kind of a few questions. I don't want to pour too many on right now, but I also would like to hear a little bit more about the U visa program that was mentioned and how exactly y'all interact with that program or participate in that. Yeah, that's all for now. Thanks.
I'll start with the first question there, B, and you did ask a couple, and I'm going to do my best. But if I don't hit one, please do follow up. We are contractually obligated to protect that data and not share it in any way. I'm happy to find that in our contractual clauses. But yes, we are, and we have that. We put that in all of our agreements that we are contractually obligated to do that. So there is. That is not just goodwill. That is our commitment. I've forgotten what your second question was and whether it was for me or not, but I've answered the first one. So please let me know if there's what the second one was. If it's for me, it may not have been. So sorry.
I wrote down a question from B, and let me know if I'm stating the question correctly. What guarantees are there that the extra data that will be associated with the Peregrine contract won't be released? Is that stating your question?
Basically, yeah. I guess I was just pointing out that
yeah, I just want to
that concern is not really addressed. Yeah, thank you.
So I am unclear on what extra data we will be generating if we were to go forward with using Peregrine. Peregrine is a platform that pulls together the data that we already have. So just to clarify that, there will not be any extra data generated. So that's that question. And then you had a question about U visas. So just to go more in depth about U visas, when a community member calls the police to report a crime, or that community member is a witness, or a victim in a crime, we take the police report, we investigate the police report. Nowhere on that report is there a column or a question where we have to answer, is this person a resident in the country, or is this person documented or undocumented? Later on, if that person wants to, through their attorney, or through various social platforms throughout the community that help and assist with that, if they want to apply for a U visa, they can do that with their attorney or on their own. And once they put in that application for a U visa, then we get contacted by the government saying, can you confirm that this person is actually involved, and would be useful to the case and would be helpful if we granted that U visa for them to stay and participate in the investigation. And we respond. If the answer is yes, then we respond yes. So that's the U visa question. That's all the questions that I was able to get down. Did we answer all your questions, B? Okay. And I don't want to skip one question I saw in the chat, kind of earlier on that I don't think we addressed. What is the implementation timeline? So if City Council decides to go forward with Peregrine, we would begin by doing a 90-day pilot trial inside of the Durham Police Department, where we would have a select group of investigators, a small group of investigators, crime analysts, working with Peregrine to learn how the technology will be best integrated and will be most efficient and effective for our officers and our community. And once we establish that, then we would move further along in the phase, but we would start with a 90-day pilot program.
Let's see. PA asked, has the department decided which agencies to gauge interconnects with and how to respond to interconnect requests from others? And I assume, I mean, what with the example with Peregrine, with Raleigh and Cary, no, they haven't decided, and I don't know if we are. And if we did, it would all be in writing. It would be some sort of limited information if we did, but that hadn't been decided yet. And then I think to expand on that, you said in my example with the limited record from Raleigh, basically, if I read it right, what do we do now? So if an investigator has a case, like say Raleigh's working a homicide and they trace, evidence or something back to Durham, they'll contact one of our investigators and they work together and see if they can, pass information along to solve that particular case. But there's not a blanket sharing of information, if that makes sense. I think hopefully that answered your question. Chief Campbell, does that
Yes.
sound right to you?
Thank you.
And Captain, I think PA has asked another question down here at the bottom. I'm just reading it to process it, but.
So yeah, let's see. I've mentioned several aggregations. Is that the one you're looking at, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. Would there be a full list of aggregations that can help us understand what a person using the system would be able to find about a person, other people associated with such a person, a vehicle, or address? So yeah, so if I was to put a name in, it would take me to wherever that name may be in our system. So if, for instance, if someone called 911 and mentioned something in the 911 call, that and let's say we're looking up a nickname or something that may come up, and it would take me to that record. I would click on it. It would take me to the 911 call and I could read it, or the investigator could read it and see if that's what I'm looking for. Also, if there's a name mentioned uh, in a case report, if there's a handwritten note in a case report, the system can look at the handwritten note and give me a keyword search for it. So it's I hope I answered your question. It's basically just all the data that we have. It looks through and then takes me to the spot. So yeah, addresses, people, license plates if they're in there. Let's see. Yeah, vehicles, address, people. Yes, all that's in there because that's all in there right now in the case file and the 911 calls and the CAD system. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, it looks like there's something else in the chat from V. This is more what I was referring to when I mentioned additional data. Even if new data isn't being collected, it's being aggregated and packaged in a way that facilitates the work or entities in a way DPD doesn't on its own. Okay. Would you like to respond to that, Captain Couchet?
Well, ICE won't have access to our systems. ICE won't have access to Peregrine. Let's see, where it facilitates work. And sorry, I'm just rereading and make sure I'm answering this correctly. Data is being aggregated package in a way that facilitates the work or entry. Yeah, ICE doesn't have access to our records, and it just helps our investigators solve cases better, quicker, and more efficient. And that's, again, I just want to say that's across the board. We're not just talking about solving homicides. If we can solve, stolen vehicles and get stolen vehicles back to people quicker, that people are deprived of their vehicle, their property, it's a real hardship on folks. So if we can get that stuff faster, it is just as, efficient and good that we can get the homicide solved faster and everything in between. So it just makes us more efficient with, getting our work done and solving the crimes and, getting the bad folks off the street. So.
Thank you. The next question by Shanice Renee. What is the monthly or yearly cost of the systems currently used? That is an excellent question. Since we were here to discuss mainly Peregrine and new systems that we want to integrate into the Real-Time Crime Center, we don't have that information readily available, but since it's in the chat and this meeting is being recorded, we will make sure we address that in our FAQ page. Once we're done with all of the Real-Time Crime Center town halls, we are going to integrate all of the questions and answers and FAQs that we came up with, all these wonderful questions from all of our community members, so that everyone will be able to read the answers to questions that they may have had, but they may not have been able to ask, or they weren't able to come in to one of the meetings. Is the FAQ page already up? If you'll scroll up in the chat, almost to the very top, Assistant Chief Pyatt added a link to our Real-Time Crime Center page right now. There is some information in there. But like I said, once we are done with the Real-Time Crime Center town hall meetings, we're going to incorporate all of the questions and answers that we can and put them on the FAQ page. So we have to finish what we're working on right now to be able to do that. But thank you. That's a good question.
So, Shanice, are you referring to like how the officers get dispatched out in our record management system? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's why I just wanted to make sure, because we don't have a system like Peregrine now. So.
I'm looking through the chat to make sure we haven't missed any questions.
Can you talk about the infrastructure that will be necessary? B.
I'm happy to speak to that just from maybe Chris can step in on his side, but the deployment of Peregrine requires no new infrastructure for the city of Durham. There are no servers to be deployed, no new infrastructure to stand up for the city of Durham that will be in addition to simply to what Peregrine is doing. So there's no further infrastructure build required. B, that's assuming I understand your question. I was thinking like in terms of like sometimes deploying a new piece of software means we have to buy servers and buy things like that. And so that's what I'm responding to. If I've misunderstood that, please correct me.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, B, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Thanks. Yeah, that answers part of my question. I guess maybe my follow-up question is then, I mean, what infrastructure is used, or I'm assuming like there are servers necessary, or like are yeah, can you speak a little bit more about just the infrastructure that's used for storing and processing that data? And yeah, does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the infrastructure that we use to run Peregrine. Peregrine is run in so there's um, three major cloud providers that provide cloud environments for government, for companies. Basically, any cloud environment for a piece of software is going to run mostly on one of three cloud environments, and that's Amazon's, Google's, and Microsoft's. Those are the three big providers. We use Amazon. It's called AWS. Primarily because they were like the first in the space to create a separate government-focused cloud environment that met the rigorous standards required for government. They're the most kind of established in the space in terms of that government work. And the one we determined was most well fit for what we wanted to accomplish as a company. So that Amazon GovCloud environment is what we use. There are data centers across the country that offer where that data sits. It's not in any one data center. That's kind of part of the cloud environment offering, is that there is redundancy. And so we use the AWS GovCloud Cloud environment, and that means it sits across a number of data centers run by AWS. Before I go on, I know she needs to see your hands up, and there's a couple other questions, but I want to make sure B that is there any follow up on that on just on the technical side?
No, thank you. That answered my question.
Great. The next question I'm seeing here was and I think this is directed at me, so I'll take it. But there's a mention of being able to search handwritten notes. Is the OCR a new component, or are such notes already tagged? I think if you're asking, is it maybe PA, maybe you can just clarify, is it a new component for Peregrine, or meaning are you saying it's new to DPD? Like, is this not something that DPD already does today? Is that what you're asking?
And Tim, I responded in there that we currently the handwritten notes are part of the case file, but they're not searchable, only that we know that they exist. So an officer would have to open up the case file and then pull up the handwritten notes from the investigator from the cases. Of course, there's more the farther back you go in time, the more handwritten notes there are. So as far as that side goes.
Yeah, so and I think PA was referring to a conversation in a previous meeting. So for those of you for whom this is your first conversation, just to clarify, it was one of the ways in which Peregrine helps make data more useful is to run what's called OCR, or optical character recognition capabilities, across either handwritten documents or documents that are maybe typed out, but they're in PDFs, which means a computer can't keyword search them. And so we OCR that data such that that is now keyword searchable. So if you look for a name or something like that, and it's sitting in a handwritten document or a PDF, you can now go find that when you search it in Peregrine, as opposed to before you'd have to know it was there and go read it yourself, the way Captain explained. I think Shanice has had her hand up for a while, so I don't know, Captain and Chief, defer to you, but I think Shanice is probably next.
Hi. I have a quick question. When we met with Chief Andrews, she stated something, and I'm trying to find my notes, but Um, I have a 6-year-old that just like puts stuff in all different places. So, but she stated something about the option of having a like actual server um, that held all of that data instead of going the route with Peregrine. And I'm curious as like, is that what you all have now, or is that something like that's an option? Or yeah, I think I kind of understand the like difference in what you're saying of like everything being stored in the cloud and all of that, but I'm curious if there is a actual like server that is already implemented in the police department, and if you all are using that right now to yeah, store all of that data.
Okay. I was in that meeting with you, Shanice, so I'm trying to recall what exactly was said, but I believe it was about an on-prem server. Does that sound familiar, Shanice? Okay. Um, so I believe that's what
Okay.
you were
Sorry,
talking
it wasn't letting me unmute. I
about.
apologize.
Oh,
Yes, she said that was also another option. So, I
okay.
would love to know what the cost difference is for between that and Peregrine, and also just uh yeah, the difference between having the two.
Oh, okay. I do remember what you're talking about. The what was brought up about the on-prem was to address any concerns about information being stored anywhere else. I would have to let Tim Shriver discuss whether that is an option with them, but Chief was speaking more about if we did not go with the Peregrine contract, if there were other companies that provided that.
Um, I can only speak to Peregrine side of this. So, Shanice obviously wasn't in the conversation. Spent a lot of time with Chief Andrews, and we haven't discussed anything related to an on-prem server from Peregrine's perspective. That's, the software we provide is a cloud-based service. So it has to be stored in the cloud for us to be able to do that. And the only thing I'll add is, because we talked about this last night as well, I think it's important to distinguish between a database where all your information is just dumped in the same place and an offering like ours, which is not just dumping the information on one place, but cleaning that data, structuring that data, offering you a team of folks who are experts in data that can help make that data useful, which is very different than simply dumping it in a database. And that's one of the kind of reasons generally departments and cities work with us, is the kind of capabilities that come from being able to do something more than simply dumping it all in one place. But maybe I could ask maybe Chris. Chris, you could speak to um, some of the ways in which Durham is already deploying. Some things on-prem, some things on cloud. Like my understanding, Peregrine would not be the first instance of deploying something in cloud in Durham, if I'm correct.
Right. So basically, what we look for when we're talking to a vendor is what is the most secure way that we can utilize the vendor to do the things that we need them to do. In some cases, the vendor is not able to offer a cloud solution, in which case we do have to do an on-prem solution, um, like uh, like Central Square and things like that. Those are all on-prem. When we do have the ability to go to an AWS government cloud solution, it's actually more opportunistic for us because it costs less in the long term, um, and it's also more resilient because we have the ability to get to it through a lot of other means other than just having a server and a backup server that are on a singular network that could potentially have issues. With the AWS cloud infrastructure, uh, we've got a 99.99% uptime guaranteed. which means we can get to it all the time, no matter what happens. And, you know, weather, tornadoes, hurricanes, things like that. Like if the city loses power, that's not good for our local server. In the cloud, we have the ability to get to it all the time because it's got redundancy across the entire country. Does that make sense?
She may
I
not.
hear you. I'm trying to figure out my response to that, my question. Um, so yeah, I'll let someone else go for a minute and then try to figure out, yeah, exactly how I want to respond to that. But thank you.
Okay.
I'd love to come back to the question that Pia, you've asked a couple of good questions here, and I think the captain responded to some of it. I want to make sure you get a response to all of it. So you asked, are there other similar data enhancements like facial recognition or license plate extraction from videos or making 911 call content searchable? So uh, just as DPD doesn't use facial recognition, Peregrine doesn't deploy facial recognition. So that is not something we do. Um, in terms of license plate extraction from video, two things. Peregrine does not currently enable license plate extraction from video. There are no like surveillance cameras, like CCTV cameras or anything like that, a part of the current contract from which we would extract those license plates. And finally, making 911 call content searchable. 911 call content is searchable today because in terms of not the recorded call. So if you think about, there's two things that happen. There's the call itself, and then there is the dispatcher's notes, which is called the CAD narrative. That CAD narrative is typed information, which is already searchable because it's typed notes, and Peregrine is making it more easily searchable. And I can give you a couple of examples how making that text more easily searchable has made a really big difference. Um, but so hopefully that answers those questions. And then I'll answer the top one, then I'll pause for you to jump in and let me know if I've missed anything. Does Peregrine make calls to an LLM instance or other services outside the customer? So to step back, and this is in the notes that have been in the FAQ that's been shared, but I want to kind of step back on all things kind of artificial intelligence because this has come up in previous conversations and it's worth stepping back on, I think. What's key to understand about Peregrine's use of artificial intelligence is that a few things. One, all uses of artificial intelligence in Peregrine are optional. They are not a core part of the platform that DPD has to use. There are a few very key ways in which we have found artificial intelligence to be very useful in making the platform more effective and making it more useful to solve crimes, get information to the hands of officers, et cetera. All the things I've talked about tonight. Um, One of those is I already talked about earlier, deduplication. So that's an application of machine learning that is a form of artificial intelligence that is really effective in cleaning data and getting so at a really high degree of accuracy. And that is a functionality that the department can turn off or on. OCRing is actually also a form of artificial intelligence, computer vision, basically being able to go through handwritten documents and pull out words where otherwise it would just be kind of a picture. And there are other ways in which Peregrine is using LLMs to summarize information, to make information more accessible. Those LLMs are all basically the way AWS GovCloud works is that it offers the ability to use those LLMs within the environment where the data sits, where the data securely sits. So it's not sending it out to ChatGPT or Claude or any of those LLMs, but using an instance that sits within the government cloud environment, which is the only reason it can be used on this kind of sensitive data. Again, all optional, up to the city of Durham and the police department, whether or not they want to use any of those options. And we try to be very particular about using artificial intelligence for very specific things, not just blanket uses, but very specific things that make the use of the platform more effective for serving the needs of police departments and other customers. So well, let me pause there. I think there's been a couple of more questions since, but I want to make sure I answer those questions. Any follow up on that, that I missed there, and then we can jump to a couple of these other ones.
No, I think you covered everything. We can jump to a couple of the other ones. Did you see the very last one from Ruby S?
Let me read it for a second. Yeah, so it seems like both B's questions and Ruby's questions are about the future of facial recognition use. No, we don't have it's not currently in our contract. It's not our standard contract to um, guarantee the not using things that we currently don't use and have no plans to use. There would be a long list of things. Uh, and so, um, yeah, short answer is no, there is not a contractual obligation not to do that in the future. Although any new capability of that kind, again, we have no intention of using facial recognition. That is not a part of our product roadmap. We are not planning to, we do not desire to. But any new functionality, again, the department could decide if they so chose to do that. And the If the company is sold to Palantir, for example, again, you don't have to believe me, but all I can tell you is we're not going to be sold to Palantir, and that's certainly not a plan of ours nor a desire. The one thing you should know is if any of these things were to occur, we were sold to another company that the city of Durham decided is not one they trust, or we decided to start deploying a technology that the department didn't trust, obviously cut off the contract. Durham can turn around and cancel that contract at any time. And so that would be the mechanism that the city has in place should we is there a penalty for canceling? No, there's no penalty for canceling. And in fact, basically the way local government contracting works in general, and certainly works in this case, which is that of course, at any time, the city can cancel the contract um, and without penalty. And on an annual basis, the city has to decide to allocate the money for it. So it can also decide at that annual basis not to allocate the money for it and decide not to move forward. Um, so there's plenty of kind of space without penalty, without further cost for the department to decide not to move forward, should they decide to.
Thank
And,
you.
and and just to like step back on like again, to the extent that you care, like our business practices, like if we were to do something like that, like we would basically be losing the revenue which would come from next year because we would be betraying our commitment to you all as a community and to the department. And so we are you don't have to take it on trust. Like we are financially not incentivized to violate that rule, violate that commitment, because it would basically destroy the value that we hope to see on our end. So, if that's helpful at all.
Great question. Thank you. And great response. Are there any further questions? I think we've answered everything in the chat, unless I'm missing something, Captain Kusha.
Yeah, I was just kind of scrolling back through. There's a lot of activity in the chat, so I just want to make sure that, like Chief Campbell said, we get everybody in here. So. PA said, understood what you said about the 911 operator's notes, but is voice to text an option or a planned inclusion? No, not that I know of. We haven't gotten that far yet. So
Well, what would be required? What, just so you know, Pia, because there are some companies that do this, that what would be required is, and I actually don't know if Durham already has a recording, like a company that records all the calls. Like Peregrine wouldn't like plug into the calls themselves. You'd have to have a company that actually does the recordings, and then that company could pass those recordings to Peregrine. A lot of what you generally happens in other departments is they have a company that receives those recordings and transcribes them, and then those transcriptions are fed into Peregrine to make those transcriptions searchable. But that's not currently something that's being considered by DPD or this contract.
Yeah, we don't currently transcribe there's not a transcription service because myself and Chief Campbell have gone through the 911 calls before and there's not a transcription. Let's see, make sure. I think we've covered everything in the chat.
Yes. Looks like B has her hand up.
Hi, so I heard y'all say that if you start using like facial recognition or something like that in the future, DPD has the option of canceling the contract. I'm wondering if y'all are contractually obligated in any way, or there's any assurance that we the DPD will be notified if there are changes like that, or how they will know if Peregrine does start using facial recognition or any other new technology or process.
Tim had said, he had said that if it's not a factor, but if it did something, any feature in the future, we'd have to be notified and it'd be an optional feature. Is that fair, Tim?
Yeah, so the key contractual hook here, and so again, there's not a contractual statement regarding facial recognition because that's not something we do. Um, but the data that Durham has can only be used to serve Durham's needs. Um, and so we could not, so for example, if Durham says, hey, we don't want you to use an LLM over this data, we don't want that functionality, we can't deploy that on Durham's data because that would be deploying it on Durham's data for something that Durham doesn't want as part of the service we're providing. So that's, I think, the best place you could look in the contract. And again, it was asked earlier, like I think all of these documents, because folks have quoted them back to me in some of these meetings, are available. I'll defer to DPD's tell you where, but I know that these said that they were made available for the original city council meeting for folks to review themselves.
Shanice has her hand up.
Hi. So I mentioned earlier, and you spoke about Palantir, like there's been no conversation with Palantir, all of that. Personally, I feel like, and folks from my organization feel like the name was just incorrect, that instead of Palantir, um, Peregrine. But yeah, it should have been what was used, because then at the next city council work session, it came up about signing this contract with uh, Peregrine. But after doing research, we also found out that one of the partners that started Peregrine worked for Palantir about 15 years ago. And we also know that Palantir is one of the major donors um, of the reconstruction, quote unquote, of the White House that Trump is bragging about right now, while people are trying to figure out how they're going to feed their families. And so I'm curious about the connections, because I don't really believe in coincidences. And I feel like there is some connection between Palantir and Peregrine.
Okay.
And that
Janice,
makes
I can tell you that we have, there's no connection with Palantir and DPD. Is never on the table. Myself and Chief Campbell and Chris Bushek there's one other person missing from this committee, but we vetted and looked at everything else along with all the other command staff. And I can guarantee you 100% that we have nothing to do with Palantir. And that all started on a Reddit rumor, and that's all I know. But I can tell you we have nothing to do with it. So, and I know Tim can probably address the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Yeah. To address the other piece of it, I mean, I'll say about the Reddit post that it was brought to my attention that there was talk of Palantir meeting with the mayor, and there was something at a restaurant or something like that. That wasn't a mix up with us because we weren't at that restaurant. I've never met the mayor. So I don't know what that was referring to. It certainly wasn't a mix up with us because it wasn't referring to anything related to us. I don't know if anything did happen or not, so I'm not aware, but I'll just say that like that was not in reference to Peregrine. I don't know if it was a reference to someone from Palantir. Um, and you're right to point out, one of our co-founders did previously in his career work at Palantir. And that is the extent of the connection between the companies. So we have no commercial relationship with the company. We have no connection to the company other than the fact that our co-founder did work there at a previous point in his career. And to go back to what I shared earlier, it's, I think a big reason, people leave companies for a reason. And, part of the reason one of our co-founders left to come start Peregrine is because Palantir was not a company that could serve these kind of needs, could not pass the scrutiny, could not technically deliver to support police departments like Durham and police departments and sheriff's office and fire departments and EMS, like the ones that we have built Peregrine to serve. So I understand the concern, I understand the connection, but just to be clear, like there is no connection between our two companies besides that former employment. And there's a reason we built the company the way we have in the public eye, under the scrutiny of city councils and communities looking at what the software can really offer and what it can do. And for 8 years, we've done that. And then for 8 years, we've successfully served communities and undergone the scrutiny that's required to serve local government and protected folks' data and delivered really important outcomes for the people using the platform to, again, solve crimes, deliver services safely, and allocate resources and design strategy in a thoughtful way.
EA asked about, can you describe how Peregrine's domain-specific experience mitigates the kind of risk for potential false positives? And I know, at least on the DPD side, like I mentioned earlier, when the data comes back, that it is verified by an actual human when the search results comes back. And I'll let Tim expand if there need be.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, Pia, you're absolutely right. There's a reason we did not just take an algorithm, process from some other realm and apply it to police data. This was something we developed in-house. We now have 2 patents designed by our engineers to do this, specifically built with local government in mind. One of our customers asked us to work with them using their data because this was a particular problem for them, to use their data to design it rigorously to do this duplication, both in an effective way, but also in quite a conservative way. And when I say a conservative way, I mean it will, when choosing between the potential of a false positive and not making a match, it will choose not to make the match. And so it is designed to not make the match where the confidence is not high. That doesn't mean there's never going to be a mistake, but it is designed specifically with that in mind because the department we were working with, I think we would all agree, but very much directed us and said, worked, hand in hand with us to design this such that it would serve their customers serve them effectively. So it was designed with that in mind, and built to align with the needs of law enforcement and the very high demands for getting these kind of things right. Can I list the patents? I can include that I'm happy to point you to the patents. Those are, I believe those are public facing documents. I've actually never looked for the public facing version of them. But assuming that they are, because I think patents have to be, yes, happy to point you to those documents as part of the FAQ.
All right. I think those are all great questions that we got tonight. We appreciate everything. Chief Campbell, you have anything?
No, I agree. Those are excellent questions. I'm glad everyone was able to come tonight and ask so many knowledgeable and intelligent questions so that we can have a thoughtful conversation surrounding this and hopefully present an understanding on our FAQ page of everything that we've talked about in these town hall meetings.
Any final questions?
Thank you, Ruby. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks,
you
Ruby.
coming.
All right. Check out the webpage. We'll put a bunch of stuff on there. We're going to try to put everything we can on the webpage. If you just Google search Durham Police RTCC or Durham Police Real-Time Crime Center, top Google search or Google result will take you right to the page. So you don't have to remember the web address. So, all right.
Okay. All right. Well, I won't hold everyone any much longer. I know it's Friday night and everyone has family and other things to attend to. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time to do this very, very important work. I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable evening. Thank you. Good night.